Welcome back to the Create Me Free podcast, where we explore how health and circumstance impact creativity, along with the various adaptations we do make or can make in order to create anyway, in spite of those challenges, and within the bodies and minds that we actually have. I am Kathryn Versillo, and I thought that I would use today to just tell you a little bit about myself and my story. This is episode 7 of the podcast, so we've had 6 episodes so far. I have primarily been working through my creative health cartography workbook. With you in this, I introduced the framework that I've developed over years of working about how health impacts creativity in generally 6 areas. The first area is creative process, meaning how you work, how you create. And that's what I was going through in the first 6 episodes. If you are listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, you may notice that there are not 6 episodes. That is because some of them are paid. All episodes are available to paid subscribers over on Substack, createmefree.substack.com. And then some of them are available for free to the public. This is one of those. So I just decided before moving to the next chapter in the book where I talk about creative medium and how health and circumstance impact medium, I thought that I would just tell you a little bit more about me, how I came to this work, and just get to know me a little bit better. I have certainly shared some stuff about myself in the earlier episodes. Part of what I'm doing is working through the workbook myself in real time, which means sharing my creative process with you. And I love doing that, but I realize that I have not really just told you my story. So I don't have a specific plan for how I'm going to do that. I'm just going to kind of talk to you. If you end up having questions or curiosities, feel free to message me. You can leave a comment on the Substack where this episode is located, or send me an email, kathryn.versillo@gmail.com. I'm happy to answer questions and share conversation with people. Hi, I'm Kathryn. I am 46 years old, and I'm originally from Tucson, Arizona. I moved to San Francisco in 2006 because I love it here, because my creative heart is just thrives here. It's also a really hard place to live in terms of finances. It's a mixed bag, but I love it. I continue to love it after 20 years. And I think it's shaped a lot of who I am creatively. So let's go back a little bit in time. Like I said, I was born in Tucson, Arizona. I am the oldest of 3. My brother's 4 years younger than me. My sister is 6 years younger than me. They are my best friends in the whole world. If I could change any one thing about my life, I would have us all living in the same city. That would be my dream. Unfortunately, we all like very, very different lifestyles, which is not conducive to living in the same city. My sister is in West Virginia. My brother is currently in Los Angeles. And we are Italian on my dad's side. We've been in America for many generations, but I think if there's ever a place where we might all end up in the same place, it could be if we all move to Italy together in the future someday. For now, we FaceTime and connect when we can and try to see each other once a year. So let's see. Do I want to go chronologically? I don't know how much I want to say about my childhood at this point. I feel like, when I was younger, I talked about it a lot and how it shaped me. And now I'm many years past that and so much else has shaped me. So my parents stayed together, were married, didn't have the most connected relationship. My mom both of my parents are really creative. My mom worked a more steady job at the post office and did real estate, while my dad was a woodworker and a creative and often a stay-at-home dad. They were both home a lot in the sense that my mom worked nights, so she was often home during the day when we were home. They have a lot of flaws and a lot of wonderful things about them. My father passed when I was 42, so 3.5 years ago. And my mom still lives in Tucson. And growing up, I was born in 1980, definitely identify as a Gen X kid, even though I'm right on the cusp of the end of that. I identify with a lot of the things that relate to coming from that generation. And yeah, I was just an independent kid. I dealt with a lot of stuff on my own. I had some rough teenage years, and for a variety of reasons, I dropped out of school my senior year of high school. So I had always excelled at school. Those of you who are of a certain age, you might know about the gifted and talented education program. I was in that. I was a spelling bee winner. There was ways that I really did well within the school system when I was younger. As I got older into high school, my emotional and mental health made it really challenging to focus on school. And also, many, many years later, I would come to realize that my brain didn't necessarily work in a way that was the same as what school needed. So I have always been able to like get an A, but deep, it's hard to explain. Um, I could perform, but I didn't thrive and I would shut down at times as a result of that. So I dropped out of high school. I tried to go to college a few different times off and on in those first few years. I got my GED and tried to do that. I tried working. I did a variety of different jobs. And what was chasing me a lot at that time was undiagnosed depression. I had been dealing with it for a long time. It would catch up to me. I would try to outrun it. I've shared a lot of this story in my book, Crochet Saved My Life, which I wrote in 2012. And we'll get to that in a sec. But I was dealing with a lot of stuff that I now recognize as undiagnosed depression. There was also all kinds of other stuff going on. There was trauma and there was neurodivergent stuff and stuff that sometimes I've needed to label and sometimes I haven't. And all I can say is that it was very difficult for me at many times. And I also tried really hard to find what worked for me and thrive. And that meant a lot of flailing, but a lot of amazing experiences. And let's see. So when I was 23, I became a foster mom. There's a whole story behind that, but essentially, I had been working with kids in the foster care system, and I, through a variety of things, decided to become a foster mom. I was a foster mom for a couple of years, and then really reckoned with the fact that I was too young and too inexperienced in my own self-understanding to be able to really parent anyone. So I made the very difficult decision to move on from that. Difficult because I had one child living with me who I loved very, very much. I'm happy to say that I think she is thriving now. Perhaps, perhaps thanks a little tiny bit to me, perhaps not at all. Who knows? But I am very happy for her, proud for her. Proud of her, I should say. So I was I was just trying I was trying to find a channel for my passion, and I was trying to figure out how to exist in the world the way that I was. I was super hard on myself. I was always really hard on myself. The first time I really had successful therapy, we probably spent a year with me just learning how to recognize that I was being hard on myself for not being a certain way, for being not enough or too much or whatever, all the things. And we can blame that on society or there's many reasons we end up that way, and some of that honestly is just being in your 20s. Or it's that was a hard time figuring out what I wanted to be when I grew up, which I am now grown up, and sometimes I know what I am or want to be, and sometimes I don't, but I'm much more comfortable with myself now. But I kept trying to do, and being a foster mom was pretty close to the culmination of that in terms of reaching some kind of level of burnout where I couldn't move faster than I was moving. I couldn't outrun myself. I had to stop and deal with myself. I didn't quite do that right away. So after I was done being a foster mom, I decided to move to San Francisco. I made myself the excuse of coming here for law school. I applied to the only school at the time that had January admissions. I got in and I moved here. I spent about a little over a semester in law school and totally burned out on that because that is definitely not what I was supposed to be doing with my life. It's one of those things that I probably could have done and done well on the surface, except that emotionally, mentally, and my health couldn't actually do that. And somewhere in me, I knew that that wasn't the work that I wanted to be doing. I wanted to be a writer. I didn't know exactly what that meant, and it's meant many different things over the years. I do remember a little bit before moving to San Francisco. I Before I applied to law school, I wasn't sure what I was doing, and I entered a poetry contest in a zine, and I won $100. And $100 is whatever, although coming from a zine, now that I think about it, was actually a lot of money in 2000, whatever that was. And what it did, though, was validate that it would be possible to make a living doing creative work that I cared about. That isn't how it has always worked out. I haven't always cared. So I started doing keyword writing, content writing early on in the earliest days of blogging and SEO being the kind of content people were writing. I started doing that because I wanted someone to pay me to write something. And I did some variation on that for a lot of years. And there's been times where my creativity was completely stifled because I was doing that kind of work all day long. And there's been times where I can't tell you how many times I burned out on the exact work I was doing. And some of that, again, is that I wasn't doing the right work for myself. Some of it is that I wasn't doing it in a way that was sustainable for my brain and my body and my health. Some of it is, just life, I guess. And so I would and not knowing myself. It was not being embodied and not knowing myself so that I would push myself until I crashed. I would crash and then I would quit. I quit a lot of things and quit a lot of jobs, a lot of paid gigs. But in any case, I moved to San Francisco in 2006. I did that little bit of law school while on the side I was also doing the keyword writing. And then I transitioned into full time freelance writing before the gig economy had the name as the gig economy. I did a lot of blogging originally for tech companies. I did, I don't know, cell phone reviews and uh, DSL news, and I don't even know. I don't even remember. And then I did all kinds of other writing as things emerged. And when I was in my late 20s, one of those burnout times happened, and it was the worst of them all. It, I Still hadn't been to therapy, still had undiagnosed depression. It had been years and years and years. I was 28-ish, and I completely crashed. It was a debilitating, life-threatening period of depression where I could barely function. I I, I ended up finding my way out of that, through a lot of I found a really great therapist for the first time who helped me, like I said, learn to be gentler with myself. She helped me get hooked up with a psychiatrist, and I started on SSRIs, which I have no opinion on what anyone else should do with medication. I think it's very complicated. For me, it was life-saving at the time, and often has been. Therapy, I had a terrific support system of family and a couple friends. And also, this was the time when I found crochet. Um, I There wasn't a whole lot that I could do that was productive and creative and didn't take up all of the energy that I had because I had very little. I had read somewhere or heard somewhere that you should try to return to the things you loved when you were a child. And to be honest, I didn't crochet a ton when I was a child. I remember my mom teaching me. I learned how to crochet a chain. I don't know that I did anything other than that, but in general, the crafty thing, definitely I did a lot of. I made a million friendship bracelets as a kid. I would try to sell them at swap meets and door to door. I was always just a really hands-on crafty kid. And so I picked up a crochet hook and a children's book about learning how to crochet, and I started crocheting. And now I came to realize that there were a few reasons that it was super healing for me. One being just that it gave my mind something to focus on, so I wasn't ruminating so much. Ruminating was the number one problematic thing that I did, that that was a hallmark of my depression that made things worse for me. So it gave me a focus without it being too overwhelming. I think trying to learn something really complicated wasn't going to work for me at that time because I couldn't focus enough. My brain was really scattered. So crochet worked for me. There's also all kinds of science about getting into your body and relaxing your nervous system and cross body healing and all kinds of stuff, which I came to research and write about. So I started writing a blog and I started sharing about how crochet was helping me. And I started hearing from other people, it was helping them. And then I just became super interested in like, why is it helping? How is it helping? And I wrote my book, Crochet Saved My Life, that I self-published in 2012. I went back and forth on how I wanted to publish that. I decided that I wanted to self-publish for a variety of reasons. I've always liked self-publishing, and there's pros and cons. There was a lot I was insecure about when I published that book. I there's there's ways I would certainly do it differently now, many ways. At the time, one of the biggest decisions I couldn't make was whether I wanted to include the stories that people had shared with me in the same exact way they shared them, or how I wanted to do that. And I ultimately ended up being really repetitive in the book. That was probably its biggest flaw at the time. Um, it could have used an editing eye. I, however, am super proud of that book. I put a lot of work and research into that. And at the time, there just wasn't a lot of people writing or exploring about how crochet specifically had healing benefits. There was some research over the years about knitting and its benefits, or handcrafting in general and its benefits. I was really intrigued if there was something about crochet specifically, and just talking to people who crocheted. I think at least my experience at the time was that crochet was kind of considered the like ugly little stepsister of knitting. And so knitting was higher level. And of course it was therapeutic or whatever. And crochet was denigrated as or demoted to this little hobby that um, wasn't taken as seriously. So I interviewed a lot of people about how it was helping them through all kinds of mental and physical stuff, and I wrote my book, and then that led to about 10 years of developing an expertise in that area, continuing to interview people. There used to be a monthly digital magazine called Happily Hooked, and I had a monthly column called Crochet Heals, and I would interview people for that as well as do research and read books, etc., and write that column about how crochet was healing people. And along the way, I wrote for all kinds of different magazines, all kinds of different blogs. That was really the height of when, for me at least, blogging could be somewhat financially sustainable as a career. So I was getting paid to write for websites like Red Heart Yarn and magazines like Crochet Today, and I was writing tutorials and I was writing history and I was writing my own blog, which had ads on it. And I wasn't making a ton of money, but I was getting by. And it was really cool to be able to be getting by doing something, writing something I cared about and loved to write about. As the industry shifted and SEO shifted and the algorithm shifted, my place in it shifted. Some of that due to what people were now paying for was really only the tutorials and the like roundups. They weren't looking at the health or the history or any of the aspects of crochet that actually interested me. So through a variety of things, that kind of faded a little bit. But in the meantime, between now and then, so many people have done research, academic research, scientific research into the health benefits of crochet and knitting, yarn crafting, embroidery, all kinds of stuff. It's been super cool for me to just kind of be on the edges of that, seeing what's developing, learning from other people, seeing where I contributed. Some of the stuff that I've written has been cited in academic papers, and I went on to write in 2015. I self-published my book, Hook to Heal, which is 100 crochet exercises that I developed to help people find ways to use crochet to improve their lives in different ways. So there's like a chapter on letting go. How can you use crochet to release, let go of things? Facing fears. How can you use crochet to face a fear of scarcity, for example? I came up with exercises and I published them. And again, there was this. I love that book. It is one of my favorite books that I personally still use to this day. I am hoping to actually do a second edition of both of those books, Crochet Saved My Life and Hook to Heal, at some point with updated ideas and research. However, um, that book, it was a crochet book and it had no images in it because I'm a wordy person. I've learned to be visual over the years, but I'm a words person. And for me, it was about the journaling and the exercising, and the crochet was the channel by which I learned, but it wasn't, um, I never cared about patterns or the finished product, really, honestly. And so I got a lot of criticism in the craft world for creating a hundred something page book that didn't include any images of yarn. So it was hard for me at the time to stick to what I knew was what I needed to be doing, knowing that it wasn't the way that was going to make the most money and it wasn't going to get the most success. But I firmly believe that it is my job to do the work that is most true and authentic to me as a creative person, to put that out into the world, and that it will find the people it's meant to find. I don't always find it easy to believe that. Of course, most of us want external validation and financial compensation for the things that we're doing. But ultimately, I do deeply believe that. And those two books are books that I'm really, really proud of because I did that. Whether they were excellent or as good as they could be really isn't the point. The point is that I did what was truest to me at that time. And it did find at least some of the people that it was meant to find, connected with amazing people doing amazing things. And one of those people was a woman who I interviewed for Crochet Saved My Life, Marinke. And then a few years later, she died by suicide, and it impacted me deeply. And I decided to start a crochet project. She had been crocheting mandalas, designing patterns for mandalas on her own blog, which at the time was called A Creative Being. And I invited people to send crochet mandalas to me along with their stories or thoughts about how crochet heals, about depression and suicide. And I spent about 2 years on that project, just posting daily blog posts and compiling and photos and sharing the stories. And that ultimately became a book, a coffee table book, sharing some of those quotes and stories and all of the images of the mandalas. I connected with two really, really great women who make up the team Thread Thread Winners. Oh my gosh. Alyssa and Liz. My apologies for mixing that up on this day. My brain. I we worked on gallery shows together. They were amazing in curating two gallery shows for me down in Southern California. In one of them, my brother got to join. My brother works with packs of dogs, and he brought a pack of dogs to provide pet therapy, and we did all kinds of cool stuff and spread the word about depression and suicide and crafting to heal. Those three books make up the big body of work about how crochet heals and represent the aspect of art and healing that I was most interested in at the time, which was the therapeutic benefits of handcrafting. I grew and changed, and my interests grew and changed. I became interested in the ways in which crochet wasn't healing, specifically for me. So I have lived with lifelong depression. It's been called double depression. It's I kind of exist at a low grade level of depression a lot of the time. And then I have bouts of major depression that creep in and become really debilitating. For the most part, I find that fairly well controlled these days. As I said, medication has saved my life. I was on SSRIs for a super long time. And then a few years ago, my doctor recommended Wellbutrin, and I thought, sure, why not? I was in a desperate place. I tried it, and immediately it made this humongous shift for me. And I realized that I had probably been missing some kind of dopamine connection for or production or something for my entire life. And uh, everything changed for me when that shifted. I didn't need to get my dopamine from other places that were more dramatic and less healthy. So that's been healing for me. Again, I don't think medication is or isn't right for anyone. I think your body and your mind are your body and your mind. You should do absolutely what's right for you at any given time. I share that I'm on medication because I think it's important that we don't stigmatize that for other people. When I was 17 to 27, 28, it had been recommended that I try medication, and I was so opposed to it. And I think there's good reasons to be opposed to it, but like I said, it saved my life. So in any case, um, what, where was I going with that? Oh, so in periods of depression where I found crochet wasn't helping me. And I became curious about why. Like, why does it help sometimes and not other times? And in what ways does it help? And how do other art forms help? So a lot of times when crochet isn't right for me, when writing isn't healing for me, writing is a super complicated one for me, you guys. I love writing, and I find it to be it's my prevalent form of self-expression. Like I said, I'm very wordy, as you may have noticed as I speak and speak and speak going through this whole podcast. I It's complicated because it's been my career. And it's complicated because sometimes words just aren't sufficient, or they don't come the way they need to come. Or sometimes for me, words can actually gloss over. I can be really good with words, and I can almost trick myself into thinking things are a certain way for me when actually they just came out sounding that way easily. And so over the years, I have learned to express myself and find healing in other art forms. So crochet obviously is the main one, but I also collage and I do some photography stuff. And those provide nonverbal, more visual healing ways for myself. So I became interested in, okay, well, when crochet doesn't work and collage does, why is that? Where is it? How is it actually helping me? And how is it not helping me? And is there even a way it's harming me? And just became interested. I come first and foremost from lived experience. I share my experiences, and then I try to connect with others, and I try to research and learn the science behind it and put it all together into what my personal understanding is of the world around me and within me. Whew. When I was in my 30s, I decided to go back to graduate school to get a master's degree. So I finally did get I did go back to school and get my bachelor's degree. It was when I had foster kids. I felt like, okay, I need to do something with my life. And so I did a 4-year bachelor's degree in public agency service, which is essentially a form of social work. The reason I picked it is because it was one of the only degrees online at the time that you could complete almost entirely online. And I didn't realize the reasons that I couldn't attend classes, but because of neurodivergent stuff and anxiety stuff and depression stuff, it didn't work for me. I could work online really well. So I completed my 4-year degree in 2.5 years online, for better or worse. And so I had my bachelor's. As you know, started law school, decided that wasn't the right thing. When I was in my 30s, I went back to school to get a master's degree in psychology. I went to California Institute of Integral Studies. I did their integral counseling program, and it changed my life by showing me it was the hardest thing I ever did. And it wasn't hard because of the academics. It was hard because we were a cohort we started out 16 and became 14 people who met for super intensive weekends for it should have been 3 years. I'll get to that. And the relationships that it forced me to have, it allowed me to have, the dealing with people in a different way, the empathy, the vulnerability. It was all super hard for me, and also I was ready for it. And so That said, 2 years into the 3-year program, I realized I did not want to be a therapist, which is what the goal of the program ultimately was. And there were plenty of reasons for that. And I don't know that I need to parse it down, but I have always been a writer as a career or an artist as a career. And I periodically, every few years, think that maybe I should be doing something else. And I start doing something else. And it always leads me back to am a writer and an artist. But those other experiences are absolutely invaluable to my growth and who I am as a person. And it's all kind of tied together. I have never once regretted any of the things I have done and then decided not to do. So I did 2 years of the 3-year program, and then I took a 1-year break to figure out what I was doing with the program. I ultimately decided I did want to finish the program. It was important to me to show myself that I could complete it and to do so in a way that was healthy for me. So I ended up getting that degree, but I did not ever pursue becoming licensed as a therapist. I realized that wasn't right for me at the time. But I started doing a lot of therapy adjacent work. So a lot of that at first was and still is writing for therapists. So providing mental health content to websites and all kinds of related stuff. I got to learn a lot about actually working with clients by working adjacent to therapists who were working with clients and understanding their experiences, and then doing a lot of stuff in the realm of art as therapy and continuing crochet as therapy without it being licensed therapy. It's not art therapy, it's art as therapy, which is slightly different in any case. I Where am I? Where do I want to go from here? Yeah, I don't know. I kept writing. Sometimes I flailed, and sometimes I knew what I was doing, and sometimes I was healthy, and sometimes I wasn't healthy. And I got more and more comfortable with myself and who I am. I came to greater understandings of who I am and what I need, and that there's nothing wrong with me because I can't hold a typical 9 to 5 job, and that I work really well on my own, and that I've supported myself mostly in this very expensive city doing creative things and taking on other things at the same time in order to support myself. I, as the years have gone on, I've just gotten a lot more embodied in my body. Maintain I continue to be very much a head and words person, but I have worked really hard to learn to be in my body, understand my nervous system, know what's going on with my responses to things, improve my relationships through different forms of communication, and just become gentler and gentler with myself. We are all so hard on ourselves, especially especially women, I think. Although maybe that's not true. Maybe it's everybody. We're often hard on ourselves. And it's unfortunate because there's absolutely nothing wrong with the way that we are. The way we are is the way we are. Humans are not meant to be one way. And it's it's unfortunate that we're constantly trying to fit ourselves into a certain way, whether that's a certain kind of career or a certain way of progressing through life or a certain way of learning. So a lot of what I do these days is help artists and other creative people. And I think we're all creative people, even though not everyone identifies that way. I work with people to identify the strengths in where you are now and what you need and where you want to be, what's not working for you, what the stories are that you are telling yourself that are making you feel bad about not being a certain way, and ultimately finding what is actually true for you and living that truth so that you can live a healthy, creative life. That is a lot of the work that I do, and it's the work that I do on myself. And that is how it came to be the work that I do with other people. And that looks like a lot of different things, but over time it has coalesced into what I'm doing now, which is primarily creative health cartography. And what that is over many, many, many years, I started, like I said, I expanded from crochet as therapy to craft as therapy to art as therapy to when is it not therapeutic and when is it harming? Why is it not helping? I became very interested in the broader picture of how art or creativity are impacted by our health and our circumstance. Um, Became interested in the history. I wrote a book called The Artist's Mind, which looks at some of the famous artists throughout history who were known to have mental health issues and how that impacted their creativity. And what's interesting is it's never the same way for everybody. There's some ways that are common that people can relate to. So the most common one that I always use because it's true for me is in really bad depression, you often just don't create. And you don't create because you don't want to get out of bed, because you have major fatigue and you can't get out of bed, because you find it all hopeless and pointless. That's one example. However, that is such an oversimplification of how health impacts creativity. It impacts creativity in so many ways, and they aren't necessarily bad or debilitating even. Sometimes it's just a change, sometimes it's a shift, sometimes it's like good. It feels good for you, and that's okay too. There's not a right way to do things. It's just figuring out what's working for you and not working for you, right? So I interviewed a lot of people. I did a lot of research. I went back to school and started a master's degree program in visual and critical studies so that I could better understand from the outside how the images and art that we take in impact us as a culture and what they also reflect about us as a culture, but how they impact us. Unsurprisingly, I did not finish that degree. I had a friend last year ask me, "You went to such and such school, right?" And I said, "Yeah." And they said, "Did you graduate from that one?" And it made me laugh like crazy because, like I said, I have no issue starting things and not finishing them if it's not the right thing for me. Um, I love finishing things that are the right things for me. But so I did 1 year of a 2-year program in visual critical studies. I got so much out of it because of the people that I met and the way that it shook up my life. And that was a few years ago. And through the research and the education and the conversations and the interviews I did with people and the lived experience, I came up with the framework identifying that, generally speaking, health and circumstance. So I used to just say health. And then I realized by health, I really meant all aspects of wellness. I don't think it's separate. So I don't think our financial circumstances are separate from our physical and mental health. I think one can be more prominent. They can interact in all kinds of different ways, but I don't think they're separate. And so I have started being a little broader and saying health and circumstance. But I've looked a lot at how mental and physical health impact creativity, but I've also looked at financial health and social health and relational health and systemic issues. And some of those I'm digging deeper into these days. And uh, continuing continuing to learn. But what I have ultimately come up with is that health and circumstance tend to impact creativity broadly in 6 areas, and that we can look at each of those 6 areas to identify patterns. So the 6 areas are creative process, meaning how you work; creative medium, meaning the form you work in, whether that's I tend to include scale in this section, but also the actual material that you work with. So you work with fiber, you work with clay, you work with words, you work with film. Medium. Content, what you are actually creating about. Productivity. Creative productivity, meaning your output, how you work, not just the amount, but also the consistency or lack thereof. This is a huge one for people. Health, mental health, financial health, it often just variations in being a human often impact productivity. And a lot of the advice out there is for, imagines that there's consistent productivity across a lifetime, that, oh, you should get up every morning and work before you go to your other job or before your kids get up or whatever. You should write 500 words a day, or a lot of it assumes a body and mind and life that have consistency across every day, and that just isn't true for most of us. So we have all these ideas about productivity and our lack and our laziness and all this, and I absolutely just don't believe they're true. So productivity is a big one. It's then the next one's identity. And mostly I look at artistic identity. Do you identify as an artist, a writer, a maker, or do you not? Do you have a complicated relationship with that? Does that is that impacted by your health and circumstance? So if you are in a position where you make creative work but don't get paid for it, or you aren't able to make creative work because your health is impeding it, do those things make you feel like you aren't creative or aren't an artist? That's one example of identity. And then the last category is business and sustainability. So, sustaining a career over time, business if you want to make money off of your creativity, or if your health impacts your ability to make money in general, which then impacts your capacity for creativity. So, those are the 6 areas that I have kind of found everything can sort of be slotted into. So, our health and circumstance tend to impact our creativity across creative process, medium, content, productivity, identity, and business or sustainability. That's my framework that I work from. And I have developed something called creative health cartography, which explores those 6 areas, those 6 lands. And I look at that in a lot of different ways. My creative health cartography workbook is available as a PDF, or it's available on Amazon as a print workbook. And it looks at the 6 different areas with some reflection prompts and ideas. That's one way of mapping cartography. I use the mapping metaphor pretty broadly, and I've become super interested in recent years about map making and what that means, how it relates to society and truth and reality. There's obviously lots of colonial issues with the history of map making, but there's also some super interesting history about alternative maps. And I'm talking about geographic maps right now. Alternative maps, alternative ways of looking at the world that aren't centering the typical globe we often think of. I'm also really interested in how GPS has changed um, the way we relate to the world around us. So the mapping that we are used to every day now, and how that's just different from what it used to be. When I was 21, I got into my pickup truck with my then boyfriend, and we drove all around the country, and we had maps that were paper maps, and often had to stop at gas stations and get new maps. And we had a cell phone, but it was really expensive to use, and we didn't use it, and it certainly didn't have GPS. And I don't know that I could do that today. I mean, obviously I could, but I wouldn't be comfortable with it the way that I was then. So things have shifted in society and in my understanding of my place in the world. And I say that geographically, but then that also obviously is metaphorical. Um, I have also learned a lot about other kinds of map making, maps as art, map making as there's like soul mapping. There's all kinds of psychological ways of map making. It's a framework that just super interests me, that I'm still learning a lot about. So what I do, what I have developed, is I use a collage based and text based process of helping people map their creative health terrain, their landscape of creativity, with attention to those 6 different areas I talked about. So I have a 5-session mapping process that I work on with people. We spend the first 2 sessions, which are about an hour each, usually on Zoom, but I offer alternatives, about an hour each, where we talk about your health and your creativity. And everyone is different. Sometimes people are really verbal and are able to just articulate exactly what they want to articulate to me, and we just talk. Sometimes that doesn't work for people, so I ask questions. Or sometimes we just we tell stories that don't seem to be about those actual topics. Or we'll do some embodiment exercises, different things, even visual. If I'm able to work with the person in person, we do a lot of visual mapping. So I'll explain that in a minute. But essentially, the first 2 sessions are me and you go over your health and creativity in some sort of way. And I look for patterns. You might identify patterns as well, but I am looking for patterns and looking at those 6 different areas and trying to identify um, what the what the core things are that keep coming up, the themes. Then I go away and I produce a map for you based on my interpretation. Now, I believe that you are the expert on you. You have the answers to what is right for you. My job as cartographer is simply to show you my landscape, my map, my vision of what you are telling me. And then you are absolutely welcome to say, no, that is absolutely not right. But hopefully it gives us a starting point. Within those first 2 sessions, we essentially are figuring out where you are, where you want to be, and what's in between those 2 things. So if this is a map, you are here. And you are here is your current feelings and state of being and existence around your health and creativity, terms broadly used. Where do you want to be? What does it look like if things are excellent and ideal? You may not know where you want to be, and that is absolutely okay. It's very common. I often don't know where I want to be. I think so when I talk about neurodivergence for myself, this is a term that's come up in recent years and it's used by people in different ways. And sometimes I hesitate to use it because we have different understandings of it, and I don't want to cause people to misinterpret what I'm saying. So, put more bluntly, neurodivergence is often mostly considered autism and more recently ADHD, as people are increasingly doing self-diagnosis or late diagnosis of ADHD and being on the spectrum. Neurodivergence often is considered those things. And those are the primary visible forms of neurodivergence. On a broader scale, neurodivergence is considered kind of interruptions to the linear thinking brain, and that can be caused by a lot of different things. Depression, deep depression. So I have periods of time in my life that I literally just don't remember. And I don't mean childhood. I mean like yes, there's a traumatic childhood. There's trauma in my childhood, and there's times that I don't remember as a result. That is different from what I'm talking about, which is during periods of depression as recently as my late 30s, I literally just seem to not be able to make memories or retain them. And as a result, I can look back and have almost no memory of times that I was doing plenty of things. I have photos and I have markers and I have books I've written, and I can point to things that I've done, but I don't actually hold the memories of them. Depression did that to me. So depression changed my brain. It altered my brain. It altered my ability to think. Some people call it brain fog. I get brain fog in depression. I get brain fog in other health situations. So I deal with, aging stuff, perimenopausal possibly stuff. Um, so, so sometimes I don't want to say that I identify as neurodivergent because I think that it's complicated. It's complicated, right? Because it can in a way discredit the people who are living in a certain kind of neurodivergent experience that isn't mine. But at the same time, what's true for me is that my brain has been altered by depression, and I don't think necessarily linearly. So there are different neurotypes. I think what is considered the neurotypical brain often thinks linearly. It thinks, I'm here, I want to be there, I need to do these steps to get there. And I often don't think that way. So in terms of how my brain is neurodivergent, I see a lot of different things, and then I see patterns, and they make sense to me, and then they don't make sense to me, and then I see a vision of them, and then I'm able to put them in a place. And ultimately there's a map there, and it makes sense to me, but it can be really hard to articulate, and it doesn't look like from here to there. Definitely my life path does not look like from here to there, which I love that I'm explaining my whole chronology to you, because looking back in retrospect, I can make the narrative seem linear. Definitely does not feel that way in the living forward of my life. So I say all that to say that when I talk about mapping, it sounds very linear, but it actually is very intuitive, not necessarily linear. So we look at where you are, where you want to be. Where you want to be might not be words that you can articulate. It might be, but it might not be. And there are a lot of visual exercises and embodiment exercises and other sensory things that we do to think about where you might want to be, how you might want to feel, what life maybe wants to look like. And then we look at, how do you get from here to there? What's in between here and there? And so when you think about looking at a map, a geographic map, what's in between where you are and where you want to be? Is there mountains? Is there a canyon? Is there rivers? There's things in between. What's in between where you are with your health and creativity and where you want to be? We look at that and we identify the different blocks that are in the way. And we look at that through the lens of those 6 different, that framework that I explained. And then I go away, I make a map. It is a written report and it is a visual map, usually collage. I also use digital tools. I we can talk about AI. I sometimes want to talk about AI and sometimes don't. Sometimes I get really sick of the AI conversation. I utilize AI in a lot of my work. I have a disclosure that explains how I use it and why I use it. I know it's not right for everybody, and if you don't want your work to interact with AI, I utilize different tools that don't use it. So you may receive a digital map, you may receive a hand map, you may receive just a written report. It kind of depends on how we're working together and what's right for you and for both of us. So I come back to you. We've had 2 sessions. I come back to you with the map, and our next 3 sessions are navigating the map. So we look at, we orient to the map first, and you tell me, yes, it's true that I'm here and I want to be there, and these are the blocks, or no, it's not true, or this feels right, or that resonates, or I want to dig deeper here. And then we navigate and we figure out, okay, well, what's working, what's not working, what options are there, what paths are there. We come up with creative solutions and ideas, and hopefully you go away at the end of 5 sessions with a celebration of who you are and where you are, because even if it feels terrible, you're here and it's awesome and you're doing just fine. But also where you want to be and how you might make choices and changes that get you there, or how you might honor what's true for you to get you there. And that's my mapping. That's what creative health cartography is. It's the 5-session mapping process in which I do that with you one-on-one. That's the main service that I offer, that I have been developing over. It's one of those things that, like, my entire career and research led to this work, but I didn't know that. I didn't know that's where it was going. I didn't understand. I couldn't have seen that at the time because the framework didn't exist until I did all the work and made it exist. And now it exists and it makes sense to me, and I hope it is useful to the people I work with. And I would love to work with you if that interests you. I also do one-on-one sessions, usually for someone who's done nothing. So you've worked with me for 5 sessions and you want to keep working with me in hour-long sessions for however long, weekly, monthly, however I offer that. I will occasionally offer those one-on-one sessions to people who haven't done mapping. It's a little more complex, but if you have a specific issue related to health and circumstance that you want to discuss, I can accommodate that with individual sessions without mapping. So that's kind of the gist of what I do one-on-one. The other thing I do is workshops. So I told you that I went back to school to get a master's degree in visual and critical studies, which I chose ultimately not to get a master's degree in. Um, but my first year, I met my collaborator, Badri Valian, through the program, and I we just connected creatively in such an amazing way. She's an amazing, inspiring person. We began working together. We started collaborating creatively. We have a lot in common and also a lot that complements each other. We have very, very different strengths. So we started working together on a project that began as In My Fluffy Pajamas. It became In My Feathered Pajamas. It has had multiple iterations. It is essentially a form, it's small workshops. It's a small workshop format that works with immigrants and others around issues of displacement and belonging. And there's many, many other aspects to that, and there's been many, many iterations, but the gist is that I developed workshop skills in large part through the creative work that I did with her. I owe that to her. I had done other workshop work in the past, particularly while I was in grad school for psychology, but that really honed my skills in how I want to work creatively with people in workshops. And I have now developed my own workshops, and also am collaborating with another amazing collaborator. We've started collaborating recently, Heidi. We are developing workshops together for mapping creative blocks and helping people through that. So it's a variation of what I am already doing. I have some other things in the works that are also workshops that essentially take the mapping idea and put it into a workshop in collage format. I am working on a new book project that's in the early stages about this framework. I am doing a project where I'm interviewing a whole bunch of artists anew. There's a lot in the works. That's kind of where I'm at right now, but everything has kind of come together around this specific framework. Um, because I'm passionate. I'm passionate about it. I'm super nerdy and I love to read and research. I'm also super relational and I just love to interview people and not interview in the sense of I sit and ask you questions and you answer them, although sometimes that's part of it, but really just I want to hear your story. I want to hear what's true for you. I want to absorb and be curious. And that's that and research and telling my own story all kind of come together into the work that I do. So that is a bit about who I am and how I ended up where I am today. Is there anything else that I should share with you? What else can I tell you about me? I I don't know. What would you want to know? I have 2 dogs. They're 2 large dogs that are rescues from Korea. They're my best friends other than my siblings. I live with my partner who is absolutely amazing and supportive. Relationships, romantic relationships were a central challenge for me for a lot of years of my life. I was constantly in them, and there's all kinds of things related to that and how my depression and self-understanding played into those relationships. And I lived alone for a super, super long time. And when my partner and I decided to move in together, I was not sure that was going to work. And it has been a few years now, and it really works. And I'm really happy to be where I am in my life, really grateful. So we live in San Francisco. We live in Bernal Heights. For a long time, I lived on Fillmore. Before that, when I first moved here, I lived in North Beach. My very, very best friend moved with me at that time and still lives here. I, whoa, I don't know what else to say, but I would welcome your questions. I would love to do like a Q&A where you send me your questions and I go ahead and answer them in a different episode. So that's where we're at. So this is a free episode of the Create Me Free podcast. It is on Substack at createmefree.substack.com. It is also on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And I think it goes to YouTube, although I'm still figuring out the tech of how things move from Substack to other places. So I'm not 100% sure on that. Only the free episodes go to those places. I have chosen to offer some of these episodes free, but many of them paid. I have spent many, 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 many years of my life doing free work, free creative work, mostly in the form of writing. I don't want to do that anymore. So I offer as much as I feel comfortable doing for free, and the rest I really need to be compensated for. The thing that's cool about Substack when it works, or Patreon or any of those, is that each person only needs to give a little bit for it to be sustainable for the creator to continue creating. Of course, that's a challenge because, like on Substack, we all want to support as many people as possible, and we don't have the money to support everybody. So I understand all that. I think it's a complicated system. It's not my favorite system. I honestly wish that our society compensated each of us better as creatives. But point being, I offer as much as I can for free, and some of these episodes, including this one, obviously, are free. However, 3 to 4 episodes a month are paid, and I greatly, 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 greatly appreciate anyone who chooses to pay. I offer some perks for people who do pay for my Substack. In addition to the paid episodes, you also get a couple of paid articles that are more in depth and unique from the free articles that I write on Substack. If you are on Substack yourself, I do a lot of promotion for you, monthly or quarterly, depending on how you subscribe. So I try to offer perks. I believe in giving as much as I can. I also believe in fair compensation for what I do. So this is episode 7. Episodes 1 through 6 went over creative process. And in those episodes, I go through how health impacts creative process in a variety of different ways. So I look at theory, I look at art history, I go through my creative health cartography workbook and work through some of it live so that you can see what it looks like for me working through it. Then now we're going to do the same thing with mediums. There's going to be 4 or 5 episodes about how health and circumstance impact creative medium. So the materials you use and the scope in which you use them. So, for example, a lot of people discover over time that they can't work with certain chemicals. So that changes their medium because they can't maybe paint in the same way or work with wood in the same way or whatever it is. They changes their medium. Medium also sometimes changes because of physical changes where you physically can't do the medium you were doing before. You were doing large scale life size sculpture and you now can't do that because something in your health has shifted and you can't physically do that. Or you lose a sense, you lose your hearing, you lose your sight, and you can't work in the medium that you worked in before in the same way. So you switch mediums. There's been a lot of examples in history. I'll share some examples from my own life and we'll work through the workbook. Next episode will also be free. It's the overview to creative medium, and then the rest of that will be paid. So I guess it's been an hour that I've been talking. I hope that you enjoyed learning a little bit about me. I really welcome your questions. Feel free to send them, and I will talk to you next week. Take care.